Welcome back, Mando.
Oh, greetings, Bucketheads. Mavar Tagar. Welcome to our 319th strut stealing episode of Mandovision. And I am your host, Narguy Tom. Thank you so much for checking out our small independent Star Wars podcast. We're so glad you're here. That was a little aggressive, sorry. You can hit us up on the socials, Mando_Vision on Twitter/X and Instagram. Hit me up at Mandovision on Blue Sky. You can email the show, mandovisiontom@gmail.com. And make sure to like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, Bucketheads, we are back for another Star Wars Rebels rewatch episode. And as you guys know, as you all know, as Buckethead Nation knows, this podcast is pro-droid life. And so we are very happy. I am very happy. I don't know why I keep saying we. I am very happy to have this episode to talk about the Forgotten Droid. And it's a solid episode. It starts off a little odd. We'll talk about that. But it's got a lot of the things that I like. It's very pro-droid, and I am here for it. I'm here for this episode. I'm fired up, and I'm excited. In coming weeks, I did want to tease a little something. I am going to do something a little out of the ordinary, a little something that we don't do on this podcast. I don't deviate from non-Star Wars stuff. But next week, we will do a bonus podcast. It'll be a bonus show. You don't have to listen to it if you don't want to, because it will be non-Star Wars content. Though maybe I'll find some way to tie it all in together. Because I want to go see that new Superman movie, and I want to talk about it with all my friends in Buckethead Nation. Superman is a character that is important to me. The first film, the original Christopher Reeve film from 1978, is equally important to me. It's a pivotal moment. Other than like Star Wars and Superman, big parts of my childhood watching those VHS tapes over and over and over again. So I am a fan of Superman in the cinemas. I am very excited for this new flick, and we are going to do a little podcast after I see it on, what am I seeing? I'm seeing it on Tuesday night. So hopefully I'll see it, come home, record a podcast, and you'll have it in your players the next morning. All right? So again, it's a bonus show. You don't have to listen to it. We will still have a regular episode of our Star Wars Rebels series coming out the same time, probably the day before. And it's just going to be a bonus. All right, so I want to give you guys the heads up on that. Let's go ahead and get back into our episode today, what we want to talk about. Let's go ahead and get the credentials out there. Are you ready? Are you excited? Are you fired up for it? I know I am. All right, this is Star Wars Rebels Season 2, Episode 19, The Forgotten Droid. Original air date March 16th, 2016. Written by Matt Mishnevitz, directed by Mel Zwire. Our primary cast for this week, Taylor Gray is Ezra Bridger. Vanessa Marshall is Harrison Dula. Freddie Prinze Jr. is Kanan Jarrus. Tara Sakar is Sabine Wren. Steve Blum is Zeb Orielos. Dave Filoni's Chopper. D. Bradley Baker is Admiral Constantine and the Ugnaught Shopkeeper. Steven Stanton provides the voice for AP5. Keon Young is Commander Sato. Gina Torres is Ketsu Onyo. Ketsu returns in this one. James Adumayan is the Imperial Captain. Our plot for this episode. When Chopper's attempt to buy a new leg fails, he ends up stealing one and escaping on an Imperial ship where he makes friends with an inventory droid. There you go, my friends. That is the plot. That is everything you need to know to get this one going. So let's go ahead. Let's dive into it. You know what that means. It's time. Strap on your buckets and let's go.
Get out of here. We'll hold them off. You're going to have to relocate the covert. This is the way. This is the way.
So we have ourselves a chopper-centric episode of the Rebels, And I think that's a lot of fun. Chopper is obviously one of the most underrated characters on the series, but he is still a fan favorite, still a beloved character. We like to talk about how Chopper in terms of sort of being a bit of a maniac, bit of a loose cannon, as it were. And that's because, he's like R2, but like a little bit more to the extreme, right? He is the embodiment of free will in a droid, that's for sure. And we get to explore that a little bit in this episode. The episode starts off like many of the others. Our Phoenix Squadron, they're stuck. They're still looking for a base. They're trying to figure this base situation out. They are combining the map that Rex provided from the Clone Wars with some star maps that the Lasat have provided as well. So they think they maybe now have a lead on a system where they can make a base. And they're looking at the Yost system. Coincidence that it's the Yost system, a name for a writer on the show? Maybe not sure. And anyways, so the Yost system, it sounds like we got ourselves a base, or a place where we're going to establish a base. But we still have the fuel problem. The other problem this Phoenix Squadron is dealing with quite a bit is the fuel situation. So a plan is hatched to go to Horizon Base and steal some fuel for the fleet. Now, as Kanan points out, the Imperials have tightened security in the sector, so it's going to be a lot harder than it has been in previous episodes. I mean, we get to explore that a little bit earlier in the season, the challenges of getting fuel for the rebels. Sort of a recurring theme throughout the season is the unavailability of resources for the burgeoning rebellion. So interesting to consider a lot of these things in grander terms, but we don't get to explore it too deeply. But again, you can now contrast the plight of the rebels with the stuff that we have seen and gone into more depth on in Andor. Of course, there's not like a direct cross connection linking the two shows intrinsically, but Andor is a show that explored the financial burden of starting a revolution, right? I mean, that's what the Aldhani heist is all about, is getting money to kickstart this revolution. Credits, resources, all these things are hard to come by, and it's stuff that doesn't get explored too deeply in the series or in a lot of other Star Wars avenues, but to know that it exists. It's a problem for our heroes. So they come up with this plan. They're going to go to Horizon Base, and they arrive on Horizon Base, and they're going to go do their thing, right? The rebels are going to do the rebel thing. When Chopper scopes out across the way a shop selling the matching strut that he's been looking for, he's like, hey, I'm going to get this leg. I'm going to replace the bad one that doesn't match. It's no bueno. I'm going to replace that sucker. It's right over here. Let's go get it. Well, not so fast. They're on a mission, right? Like the mission takes the priority here, not getting Chopper a matching leg. Chopper doesn't like that answer from Hera. And so we sort of see, it's not just like Chopper's sort of stubborn streak. Chopper's always been very independent, very hard-headed. But as Hera pointed out later in the episode, he's also it's Chopper-centric. He's a very me-first kind of droid. So he rockets over there against Hera's instructions to watch the ship and wait at the ship, and begins to barter and negotiate with the Ugnaught shopkeeper that is there. And it's an amusing back and forth. It goes, the idea that Chopper's an independent droid gets presented to the Ugnaught, who kind of laughs that off and just says, "Nah, you're just broke." Meanwhile, behind Chopper, over his shoulder, we see the heist being committed. We see them running with a pallet full of fuel cells back to the ship. We see stormtroopers in hot pursuit. We see them taking off and leaving. So, meanwhile, Chopper's still haggling about this leg. Now, a real customer comes over, distracts the Ugnaught, and then, so what does Chopper do? Chopper does what Chopper does. Steals the leg, tries to get away. The shopkeeper calls in some stormtroopers who are in hot pursuit because, hey, there's rebel activity at Horizon Base. Let's go check it out. Let's pursue this droid. Now this is where there are a couple things in the episode that I butt up against just a little bit. These are nits that I'm picking just for the sake of the conversation, because I would imagine that capturing a rebel droid would be the priority, right? Like, let's capture this droid, see what's in its information it has stored in its memory banks, access it, find out vital information, right? So capturing Chopper is probably the priority, but at the same time, there's got to be a way where you can still shoot the droid, disable the droid, because these stormtroopers just look foolish chasing after the droid. I'm not gonna lie, they do, because again, they could just blast it. They could blast it and then hope they could recover memory out of it later, but they could also just disable it. There's probably plenty of ways in the Star Wars galaxy to disable a droid. Small ion blast from a weapon that may, or perhaps as a function of a DL-44 blaster or something along those lines. I mean, I don't know. There's something they could do. Your blast tech must have other functions. I don't know. It just seems, I don't know. We'll leave it at that. Again, a nit that I'm choosing to pick for no real particular reason. But it leads to hijinks. It leads to Chopper on his adventure as he picks the only open doorway he can find to get away from the stormtroopers. And it just so happens to be the door that leads to a freighter that's pulling away from Horizon Base. A big old freighter stacked with tons and tons of just what do we want to call them? Just cargo containers, right? Looks like something you'd see at the San Pedro Harbor. That's jeez Louise. Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. It's the Star Wars version of a freighter that we've all seen if we've been out to any sort of body of water, and but we see the Imperial equivalent of it, right? And aboard this Imperial freighter, we meet AP-5, a droid from the Clone Wars who was a navigator during the Clone Wars and has been relegated to being the inventory manager droid of this freighter. He works for an Imperial officer who seems to despise him, who is a not pro-droid kind of person, as many Imperials are. It's a shame that the droids are treated this way, in my opinion, especially because as we get into this episode, we find out the background of AP-5 and the role that he plays. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about the choice that Steven Stanton makes for voice work. All right, he does a very admirable Alan Rickman impression to bring AP-5 to life. And somewhere in the trivia, I've read something that he kind of based it on Rickman doing Hans Gruber. But I feel like it almost has more of Rickman being the sheriff of Nottingham in it, and like a little bit of Dogma in it, than it does Hans Gruber. But that's just my ear picking it out. So what do I know? If this is a quote from Steven Stanton, then I can't argue with it. The man said it, and that's what he's aiming for. AP-5 is also based on the RA-7 protocol droids that were designed by Ralph McQuarrie. So that's pretty cool. Nice little throwback there. Just another little bit of information. The Imperial carrier that our friends stole for Phoenix Squadron, it has been repainted. Sabine has been busy rebranding as she does. So AP-5 is a very, very interesting droid. He's all about doing things by the book, following the rules. He seems unhappy that he's now the inventory droid, especially because he was a navigator back in the Clone Wars. And in this episode, one of my biggest takeaways from it was, we've seen how the Empire treated the clones when it transitioned from the Republic to the Empire, and the clones were sort of discarded and thrown out. Here we get to see that the Empire is doing something fairly similar to a Clone Wars era droids, right? They're being repurposed, transitioned, phased out is what it sounds like. Because it sounds like on this freighter, AP-5 is one journey away from being sent to the scrapyard. It sounds like he's about to be decommissioned and put away. So the droids and the clones, it seems like they have a decent amount in common with how the Empire views them in this new era of Imperial tyranny. So, I don't know. I thought that was fairly interesting that instead of viewing AP-5 as something, if you will, that is a valuable resource of information and can do a specific job, they seem to be more interested in getting rid of it, phasing it out, and bringing in the next new shiny thing. much like the stormtroopers, right? Phase out the old clones, bring in the new brainwashed dum-dums, and there you go. So Chopper's aboard this freighter, and he's a stowaway, and the stormtroopers have been put on high alert to look for rebels in the area. There could be stowaways on board, rebel stowaways. And yes, essentially Chopper is that. But he's walking around with this droid leg on his head, just carrying it around with him. Doesn't seem to have an opportunity to get it installed anywhere. So he's just carrying it around with him. It's his prize getaway thing. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get back together with everybody, back to the rebel fleet. And through a series of, again, amusing adventures through the ship, he will find himself in a position to do so. But first he kind of becomes buds with AP5. AP5, again, following routines, being sent to go get a manifest, stumbles across the room that Chopper's hiding in. And Chopper sort of laughs at him for the way he's able to kind of outmaneuver and outmanipulate. But AP5 has moves of his own as well. And so, thinking that Chopper's outwitted AP5, he goes about his business, except AP5 turns up and catches him. And then we get into what I think is a fairly fun discussion between the two characters about the idea of free will for droids. And again, it's very light. It's not as heavy as all that. You got to kind of pull the layers apart to get there. But AP5, a droid serving the Empire, has a restraining bolt on him. His actions are monitored and controlled. And Chopper bragging about having free will. And AP5 says that sounds like it'd be fun. And Chopper removes said restraining bolt and gives him a taste of that free will. But not until after AP5 has demonstrated that he's willing to go against, his orders, go against his program, his protocols, by sort of lying that he has, that when the Imperial captain calls, he tells him he hasn't found any stowaways, hasn't found any rebels on board the ship. And that's when Chopper pops that restraining bolt off. But they also have a really illuminating chat getting into some of Chopper's origins, right? We find out that he was a droid in a Y-wing bombing run on the Ryloth front during the Clone Wars. AP5 was at Ryloth. He was the navigator droid on one of the ships in orbit above Ryloth during that campaign. So they sort of trade war stories with each other, and then we get a little bit more information about what Sham Syndulla alluded to a few episodes ago on the show, that Chopper and his pilot were shot down on Ryloth, and then he was rescued. And AP5 finds that hard to believe because nobody rescues droids, and that's when Chopper flashes a hologram of Hera. And again, this is that story that Sham told us all. Hera rescues Chopper, rebuilds Chopper, puts them back together again, and they're, best friends and compadres for forever and ever and ever. And AP5 finds this all fascinating. And this is again, it's just sort of fun to have these two droids kind of swapping war stories with each other. It's an aspect of the war that we don't really think about, is the role that the droids played, and how since the Clone Wars and his rescue by Hera, Chopper's experienced a whole life on his own. He is an independent droid. He does do kind of what he wants to do. Even though he's, with Hera the entire time, he is able to act as he chooses to. And eventually this begins to bond the two characters. The swapping of war stories and then eventually the restraining bolt and the telling of lies. Now that Imperial captain does arrive, and Chopper has to take him down. Eventually getting him shocked and then passed out. But I feel like Chopper could have taken out this captain much quicker, much sooner, much easier. Instead, he just sort of swings the leg around like an extra appendage. I'm sure that hurts. It doesn't feel good, but I feel like Chopper could have got this guy unconscious a lot faster. Now we get a series of events where Chopper is sort of taunting all the stormtroopers aboard this freighter and leading them into the cargo bay. Once there, he closes the door behind them and then drops the cargo in space. They, being AP5 and Chopper, take control of the freighter, and they're going to go meet up with Phoenix Squadron. Except Phoenix Squadron is now under attack by Imperial forces, and Admiral Constantine can't quite figure out why the rebels haven't jumped to hyperspace. He eventually puts it together. They haven't gotten the fuel on board yet, because that's when the Ghost arrives. And the Ghost is the ship that matches the description of a ship that blasted its way out of Horizon Base. And So these two things kind of come together, and then it becomes a question of stalling for time. And it's a great space battle sequence here. You get a lot of fun stuff, a lot of good flying, a lot of good blowy uppy spaceship stuff, and it's like sort of the action oriented core of the episode, right? This is our moment of space combat, right? You get Ketsu flying around, giving them cover fire so they can get to the ship, get them all fueled up, and get the heck out of there. But the problem is, soon, Chopper's in communication range. He's radioing Hera as they are engaging in this fight, and they're talking about making the jump to the Ost system. Except AP5 has valuable information that the Ost system is actually a trap, so don't go there. And he's calculating what would be a new safe spot. And there is a fun bit between Kanan and Hera about, the fate of the rebellion, the fate of Phoenix Squadron now rests on Chopper and his new friend. And again, a funny line when AP5 says he's Chopper's friend, and Hera says, Chopper doesn't have friends. And basically, he does now, and I'm it. But, of course, this Imperial captain wasn't with the other Imperials who were stranded in space once the cargo was dumped. No, he comes too and begins to take control of the ship once again, or wants to take control of the ship once again. Chopper engages in combat. Again, I feel like there's a more effective way to take care of this guy. He doesn't do it, especially not before he gets off 2 shots into the back of AP5, but not before AP5 can transmit the new coordinates of a safe system for the rebels to jump to. So AP5 acting independently, helping the rebels, helping his friend Chopper. It's a great moment. It's exciting stuff. I think it's very, very fun. And of course, once Chopper does take out that Imperial captain, which after he shoots AP5, he takes him out pretty hardcore because Chopper gets pretty darn mad. He gets pretty darn mad and he stops playing around. He stops messing around and takes this guy out. And then there's this really touching moment where, it seems like AP5's about to die, and Chopper's at his side, and they're holding, AP5's hand and Chopper's little mandibles, and it's a really sweet here. And now again, it's Star Wars, and he's a droid, so Sabine's able to restore him, to bring him back. And how'd they do so? The parts from the leg that Chopper's been carrying around, the new leg that put him on this mission that got him stranded and sent him on this adventure, Chopper sacrifices it to save his new friend's life. It's a beautiful moment. I loved it. I thought it was great. And they go off and they're bickering, and it's like a new version of C-3PO and R2-D2, except a little bit more aggressive. And it's super fun. And again, Stanton doing that Rickman voice, I think, is the perfect voice for AP5. It really brings a lot to it. A lot of kind of charm, but sarcasm, but like, I don't know, it's kind of classy at the same time. I love it. I think it's a really great voice performance by Stephen Stanton. One of my favorites. He's on the show a lot as various characters, but him in this spot, love it so much. Good times there. I like the episode. Again, it gets knocked online for being quote unquote filler, but it's gosh darn good. I like getting the background on Chopper, his version of telling of events, kind of expanding on what we know about him and Hera's background with each other. The idea of droids as war heroes, the idea of droids being discarded like garbage, much the way that the Empire's discarded and thrown away the clones. I love all that stuff. I think it's really, really good. I think this is an underrated episode. It's 8 buckets for me. It's got good fighty fights. The space combat is very, very enjoyable. And, of course, we are here for pro-droid independence. That's us. Here on Mandivision, we support droid independence, all right? So that's that. Let's get out there. I want you guys, spread the word. Check out our podcast. This is Mandivision. I am your host, Tom, a.k.a. Nargai Tom. And you can follow us on the socials. Please follow us on the socials at Mando_Vision, Twitter/X and Insta. Email the show, mandivisiontom@gmail.com. Also on Blue Sky at just Mandovision. And if you're on the Apple Podcasts, Apple iTunes, whatever the heck they call it nowadays, sweet 5-star reviews. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and share the show with all the Mandalorians in your covert. All right, friends, let's get out of here. Go out there, be great Star Wars fans. We will be back so very, very soon. Like I said, there'll be another episode of our Star Wars Rebels rewatch next week. There will also be a bonus episode where we talk about the new Superman movie. And the only way, and I will try to do my very, very best to keep that spoiler free. But the only way that bonus episode doesn't happen is if I absolutely can't stand that movie. If something goes horribly wrong and I am way off base with how much I think I'm going to like that movie, then you may not hear about that Superman podcast ever happening ever again. All right, so yeah, 2 episodes next week, Star Wars Rebels and a bonus Mandovision where I'll be talking about the new Superman flick. All right, Bucketheads, go out there, be great Star Wars fans, be kind, supportive, respectful, tolerant, inclusive, embracing the ideas of others. Even if you disagree, hear them out. They may have some weird thoughts on droid independence too. I don't know. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about it down the road. But we'll be back next week, twice. But remember, this podcast, it only ends one way, my friends. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
I would like to see the baby.